right, break time's over. Okay, I'd like to knock off the minutes just so we get that done with anybody. Just want to approve them. Make a motion for approval.
I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the Wednesday, June 5th, 2022 minutes of Wednesday.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we got a move and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, file them. We spent some time on our
So I think
zoning district.
Elise and I spoke briefly. You know, I don't know how long or late we want to stay. I think we can start, maybe get started into this since we do have some folks here that are interested. We may not complete it tonight. I'm not sure what that time limit should be. We obviously have other meetings that we can put this onto. It's up to you all, to some extent, where we should maybe cut that off, and maybe we can find at the end of an individual section, hey, let's cut this off and put it off till next month. So
Yeah, I'd say we go at it for an hour at the most. 9:30.
This is just Article 5, right?
Correct, it's just,
The form base.
yes, it's just the form base. I don't think this is,
Can y'all hear me?
yes.
Awesome. Okay. So we all know, if you've been here before, that my voice doesn't carry very well. So move up. Everybody move up.
Microphone's working this time.
And if I bend down or stop being able to hear me, somebody wait.
Okay.
All right. So good evening. I am Elisa Duffy Rogers with CT Consultants. Our agenda for tonight we will briefly review the zoning ordinance update process. We thought we'd be reviewing the form-based zoning districts in some detail, but we'll figure out where we can get an hour. We'll close with next steps one way or the other. And as with previous discussions, we will stop at points in the presentation for discussion and questions. And if you can, please try to hold your questions until we stop. Since last fall, the Planning Commission has been considering changes to the zoning ordinance. We completed phase 1 in February, which included assessing existing conditions and completing a diagnostic report that summarized the proposed changes to the zoning ordinance. And this report is available on the city's website. We are currently in phase 2. In phase 2, we are fleshing out the major changes to the code, and this phase will last until roughly September. In phase 3, we will complete all amendments and align zoning out with the zoning districts. So in that phase, you'll actually get a complete copy of everything available all at once instead of piecemeal as we've been doing it over time. And then phase 4 includes the adoption of the new zoning ordinance and the map. To date, we have completed initial discussions of the conventional zoning districts and the administrative and procedural provisions in the ordinance. Tonight, we'll begin the discussions of the form-based zoning districts, and we will close this phase 2 blueprint phase by discussing the regulations applicable to all districts, such as parking and signage. The conventional zoning districts, where the foundation of the district is land use, covers most of the city. The community plan does contemplate form-based zoning districts for 3 areas of the city. Town Center, which is what downtown is called in the community plan, Midway, and in Burns. As we previously discussed, form-based districts form-based districts really do attempt to mix uses, whereas Euclidean zoning really does actually try to segregate them. And the form-based code really does focus on building form and creating or preserving a community character through both design and form requirements. There are different types of form-based codes. So if you look at other form-based codes for other communities, it may not look exactly like this one. But because community character is such a key consideration for Fort Thomas, We are using a form-based code centered or focused on building types. Regulating building types really does help to create more predictability in the built environment. So you'll see form-based codes out there, if you Google it, that don't use building types. So Fort Thomas is a little bit unusual in that respect. The contents of the form-based district are quite different from a conventional or traditional zoning code. As you can see from the screen, the bulk of the regulations are regulations for each building type. As we discussed during phase one, the palette for building types to use in these form-based districts includes civic, compact and traditional single-family, duplexes, row houses and shop houses, small and large single-family, multifamily and flex space, and Main Street mixed use. And while land use is secondary in a form-based code, it is still regulated. The key thing to remember is that the lot must have both a permitted use and a permitted building type. In addition, just because the permitted building type is, for example, a traditional single-family dwelling, that dwelling could be occupied by a non-residential use if it's permitted in the district. As I said, to have a more predictable built environment, only certain building types are permitted in each sub-zone. And if you remember, the form-based zoning districts are broken into subzones, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. And we will also discuss the permitted building types by form-based district later in the presentation. Because development is different in the form-based zoning districts, we included in the draft that Kevin is on the website. In the draft, you'll see on the website how you actually navigate through the form-based zoning ordinance. So, for example, you will start the process if you were a community member of locating the parcel on the zoning map to determine which form-based district it's in. Is it in Furnace, is it in Midway, or is it in downtown? Then you would review the regulated map. And if you were in the meeting that we had previous to this one, those are those small maps, and in the form-based code, they're called the regulated map. They are actually also on, in the document that is on the website. Once you've reviewed the regulated map and figured out which subzone you're in, because vision and community character and intent is so important in a form-based district, then the next step in the process is to actually review the vision and intent for each applicable district. Then you would look at use, then you would look at the building type, then you would review the portion of the ordinance that deals with all those other applicable requirements like parking and signage, and then finally, you would be looking at the administrative review process that would be necessary to go through. Because regulating the built environment is the foundation of the form-based zoning district, many aspects of the site and building design are regulated. For Fort Thomas, lot coverage.
No, we can't hear.
Okay. All right.
Hold on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because regulating the built environment is the foundation of form-based zoning, many aspects of the site and building design are regulated. Many more than is regulated under traditional zoning. For Fort Thomas, those things are lot configuration, principal building siding, accessory siding, height, uses, and the street facade requirements. We will spend a few minutes reviewing these regulations before moving on to the individual form-based zoning districts. And then in phase 3, the building type regulations will be supplemented with graphics illustrating these regulations. So I'm going to stop right here and pause to see if this introduction has raised any questions for anyone.
You had a couple question marks on that use lot, or the couple slides ago, the permitted uses. You want to go into why they were questioned?
I will actually, but we're going to cover that later on. We're going to,
Okay.
the way that the presentation is moving forward, it starts with this overview,
Okay.
and then we will delve into each form-based district. And so that will be some of the questions that we will address in each form-based district.
I have a question. Are you going to address right now or at some time tonight why we should completely amend our zoning code and use form-based zoning with the value that it is versus what we have right now? Because my understanding from previous meeting is that we could effectually
Okay, so if you keep the one tool that you currently have, and you decide that the area of, for example, the downtown, the CBD district is going to maintain its current size, you cannot, and its consistent configuration, you cannot govern it in the same degree of detail that you can under form-based code. For example, you could not say that only certain building types are permitted in certain areas of downtown. You could not say, for example, that there's a portion of downtown that is more intense, and there's a portion of downtown that is less intense. And when I talk about intense, I'm talking about where it sits adjacent to the sidewalk. Those are not things that you can do under traditional zoning. Under traditional zoning, you get to regulate use, you get to regulate height, and you could say, for example, the building has to be in X place. But if they want to put it in Y place, they can do that. So,
Would you regulate that with side setbacks, front back setbacks?
you can, to a certain extent, you can regulate setbacks in terms of minimums and maximums. But again, if you want to have a separate minimum and maximum for one area of downtown and a different one for another area of downtown, you can't do that very well under traditional zoning. So what the form-based code will do will give you the ability to take downtown, split it into, for example, as we're doing here, 3 different areas, define the character for each one of those. When I say define the character, we're defining it by a couple of different key things. Mainly, we're defining it by the permitted building type, and the setback, and the uses. And you just simply cannot do that under traditional zoning. Now, if the community makes a choice to completely abandon form-based zoning, we will do the best we can with the blood tool that is a part of, that is inherent as a part of traditional zoning. But you are not going to get the fine-grained detail in terms of all the things I just mentioned under a traditional building, under a traditional zoning.
I think that's a reasonable question to ask the Planning Commission. Does the Planning Commission want to continue with a form-based code through these downtowns? I mean,
Well, I see that it's in our comprehensive plan that we would consider doing it, but I don't remember why it's in there.
And Dan, somebody said tonight, there was a pre-meeting, I just wish you guys had been there because there were so many more people that was packed.
It'll be on the phone, on the tape, you can watch it.
But somebody was in there who was on the subcommittee for zoning on the comprehensive plan, and she said that this form-based zoning, you know, like basically she didn't know where it came from. I've talked to somebody else who was on that subcommittee, and they said the same thing. I realize that this organization wrote the comprehensive plan, but I don't know if you've read it, it's 200 plus pages. I would send you guys, so there's just one part that's about zoning. It's very technical language. It's difficult for me to separate out what came from the citizens and what came from the copywriters. You know, what policy really came from the citizens and what policy came from basically this organization. So,
Well, just the way that it was explained, I think, it sounds like it's advantageous. For example, can somebody make an application to put a bank in the middle of their CE and make a glass building that's 3 stories high? And as long as it, you know, you look through our zoning code right now, and a glass building that's 3 stories high does not violate anything in that zoning code, and so we got to say yes.
and if the lot is, if the Fifth Third lot, for example, which is, I don't know how many hundred feet deep, they could place it as far back on that lot as the rear setback would permit.
Yeah, so the question was, I think, a good question. You know, should we do that? And I feel like you can kind of conceptualize the worst case scenario that somebody's following the letter of the law and they're making a presentation. And if we look through this, our current code and say they're not violating anything here, we have to say yes. You know, it sounds to me like form-based code allows you to get, I guess your word is granular, where you can be a little more specific about
My
how.
understanding tonight from what Alicia said was, as long as it's that type of building, let's say row house, because that's what's being proposed, or large multifamily unit, that's another one of these forms we're supposed to consider. It can be very contemporary, you said, right? As long as it's in the form, it can be a contemporary looking building.
It can be, these standards control building placement and many aspects of the building facade, but it does not control style. So as long as it meets the standards for openings, windows, transparencies, floor height, those kinds of things, it can be contemporary. However, what it cannot be, for example, is a building that is completely a blank wall. It cannot be a building that has an opening, no windows, and is short and squat. It can't be a building, depending upon which subzone it is, that's set real far back from the sidewalk on Fort Thomas Avenue, for example. So while we are not controlling whether it's a traditional style or a contemporary style, we are very much controlling how it actually addresses the street and the factors that are defined within for each building type. And we will actually go through what's being regulated later on in the presentation. And again, you're going to regulate 5 or 6 things through traditional zoning, and we're regulating about 38 per building type. So it is much more finely grained. Certainly, as I said, if the planning commission and the city council chooses not to do this and to go back to traditional zoning, we will do the best we can. But it will not be this fine grained. But I agree with Franklin that it is a very large policy question. Do we keep doing this? This is the question to the planning commission. Or do we throw this out and try to do the best we can with traditional zoning?
I've got a quick question. It seems like the form base allows you to paint with a paintbrush, where as the previous zoning ordinance would be more like a roller. But I'm hearing a lot of concern from the citizens, a lot of pushback, and I'm wondering, are we missing something? Is there some way in which the old system is better? I'm hearing you say it's a lot more versatile, form-based. Is there anything that we're bringing up that makes you think, well, form-based or use-based is better for this reason? I'm not hearing it. I'm not seeing it.
Given the communities, whether you agree or disagree with the intensification of use in downtown and building environment in downtown, for example, going back to, and I love that analogy, going back to using the roller is probably not going to give the community the predictability that they would like to have. But again, we do the best we can with that one choice.
I have another question. So at this point, I think there's several things going on. And one of the two, I think there's a mixing of issues. So if you go to form base, now we're going to decide what, first of all, who picks the forms. And then what's being proposed on top of form base is not just form base, but also large multifamily housing and row houses, where in Fort Thomas right now, we have basically single family houses with yards and nice green space. But then my question is, the reason I'm leaning toward the others, when I look at the current zoning code that we have right now, I see a list of uses. It's pretty comprehensive. If we scrub that, we do a form base, and let's say this company comes in and they go right to the form, they do what they're supposed to do, and it's Larry Flynn. And they then put, a hustler store like Fort Thomas or whether it can, does anything go use-wise when you use form base?
No. Use is still a component of form-based code. And whether you do a form-based code downtown, for example, or you use a traditional, the list of exhaustive uses that you currently have in your zoning ordinance is going to go away because it doesn't work very well. Because, for example, you end up with, this is a particular use of area community, a store that wants to paint and sip wine. Because experiential retail is now a norm as opposed to traditional mercantile. And if you don't have a use where you can paint a plate and sip wine specifically named in the 50 things that are there, then it's not a permitted use. So every community, whether they're using traditional zoning or form-based zoning, goes to things like experiential retail with a good definition and a retail establishment with a good definition. But just because it is a retail establishment does not mean that Larry Flynn can put an adult use downtown. But what I will say is if there are uses that are particularly bothersome to you, we need to know that because we need to be able to either prohibit them or define uses that we do permit in a way that they are permitted or prohibited. But I can assure you that there is absolutely nothing we are going to do, whether it's traditional or form-based, that is going to permit an adult bookstore downtown.
And the reason being, you can't, you're not permitted to just say no to this. And as soon as you do, there will be a lawsuit, and you'll lose. And so there was a choice. There was a choice to put them there for a reason. Now, I think there's going to be some interesting discussions if that road stays closed, as to whether or not it's fair enough. So.
I do have a comment as far as why, what possibly you be working with traditional 150 years plus, worked for 150 plus years. Suddenly it's not working, and it's coming coincidentally with a national movement to urbanize suburbia, to make it not look like what we had for 150 years. And I think that there's a hesitation of who's driving this particular bus.
Basically, the vast majority of all the buildings in the town center in Inverness and Midway were built before there was any zoning.
That looked great to me. And it was funny.
So we haven't had zoning for 150 years. We've only had zoning since the 60s, yeah, mid to late 60s. I think 1964 is our first zoning ordinance. Really? So anything built before 1964 didn't have any zoning.
Well, there's tons. I mean, everybody knows this could be a R1B street that has two-family houses on it because they were built beforehand, and all of that was grandfathered in. No questions asked, no problems, no anything. But I mean, I sort of go back to it's taken an awful lot of emotion out of residents, a lot of time out of residents and staff, a lot of money to fix something where I'm not sure who's broken.
Well,
one thing you got to keep in mind too, I feel like, is that everybody's kind of used to seeing those houses. I'm just talking about the town center specifically there. And that's, everybody's used to seeing those houses there in the town center and in certain other buildings. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody can't come in and buy that with the specific goal of redeveloping it. And so it's just a matter of how much control you want to have and how much say-so you want to have if that happens. Because
you can't change your R1D to multi-family, I mean, a 12-unit apartment.
well, I think specifically we're talking about the business districts right now.
I am too, because there are some homes right up there in between the Masonic Lodge and Forest.
Well, that's a central business district zoning right now.
so today, somebody can buy all those houses in Paramount Ave today.
Yeah, that was mentioned in the Q&A session.
I don't think that anybody is saying that a change in zoning is needed to protect that from happening. I think that people agree with that. I think that, city plan, for right or for wrong, this is right out of the city plan, and I quote, all of these features contribute to the small town feeling we all enjoy, a city in the park atmosphere, family-friendly, city with a park-like setting, houses with front porches and tree canopies. I think what we had in Fort Thomas, I've been around for a long time, I was going a little bit, but long time, I guess that's the west side of the street, that's when the sun goes down. But what we had there was a line of basically single-family homes. And now at the other, how many of those were taken down when Highland did. But I think that's what, if we're talking about the traditional character of Fort Thomas, the essential character of Fort Thomas, that's what our downtown was. It was green space. It was, you know, a nice tree-lined street. It was all of those things. And to see, whether we do form-based or however we do it, to see that all changed up, to bring in large multi-families, to bring in row houses, is not the essential character that we're all used to in Fort Thomas.
I guess one thing to think about though, like I mentioned, so our first zoning ordinance was in 1964. That first zoning ordinance was based off of the Northern Kentucky Area Planning Commission, which created a model zoning ordinance for all of Northern Kentucky, Florence, Union, Fort Mitchell, Covington, Alexandria, every place. And our original zoning ordinance was the same as everybody else's in suburbia in Northern Kentucky. And ever since that time, incrementally, we've been pulling that back. And this is the latest phase of that process, to try to make it more reflective of what's there today. Not necessarily preserve those houses as they are, but to make our zoning ordinance fit Fort Thomas and not be just generic suburban Northern Kentucky. And so we've been working for the past 30 years to kind of bring that back.
So I think there's two issues on the table here at least. But issue number one is do you guys want form-based or not? And then issue number two, what you're talking about, David, is that what we're used to on that side of the street is the nice green space, is the single-family homes. That's what we're used to. So that's the essential character of the central business. So there are two issues. A, do we want this? B, if we do, just that zoning in general, do we want what these folks are proposing to put row houses and large multifamily, like that down for Thomas Avenue?
So I would say that when I read proposals, including what's going on with the business districts, but the whole thing, there is a lot of things that people don't understand are already zoned in a way that could end up with uses we're not expecting. You saw those houses there that whole time, people thought those are great. They didn't realize that no zoning was changed and it was disappeared. But this new proposal, where it does add new uses, like the row houses, that's why I think people are questioning. I'm all about property rights. You buy a piece of property, it's zoned a certain way, the city should have to take that away without some sort of compensation. So the sad fact is, for some people that love all the houses all the way down to Forest, someday they might not be, because there's already zoning in place that will allow them to not be that. But expanding the uses to things like row houses, or changing things on the 27th order, you can add, but it's really hard to take back. So I think you need to be careful about adds.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general, in the form-based code, I mean, personally, I'm comfortable with moving forward. Not necessarily every detail that's in here, but it does give you more flexibility than what we have today. To try to, at least from a livability, urban design standpoint, make the neighborhood more inviting than what it might be just controlling the land use and how tall something is.
How much more inviting do we want? You can't have your house for sale for 12 hours. If you do, you think you're overpriced. And they usually go in about 4.5. Seriously.
But like,
so, and you just said urban. That word, it's just dagger in my heart. We're suburban. We are not urban.
well,
We've got two
I guess it
of
depends.
urban.
If you wanted, if you could, somebody could put, what we're trying to prevent is somebody putting a UDF or a drive-through.
We
That's-
need a UDF, but we don't need the drive-through.
Well, in our 1964 zoning, you could have done that. And the Fifth Third did that. Somebody else could have done that before we did the current town center zoning. Somebody could have put a drive-through over there. Yeah.
I'm not sure that even the form-based is going to help that situation. Frankly, well, I see here minimum lot sizes and there's no maximum lot coverage. That's a different thing. What happens when somebody buys all of those 6 houses between the lodge and Forest Avenue, and then they come before the planning commission and they say, we want to combine these 6 parcels into one, which is a request that you guys get fairly frequently. And I have yet to see you say no.
They can do that.
So they can do that under this.
No,
Yes,
Well,
they
they-
can.
So they could do that under this. But if they do that, the width of each building, depending upon which building type they choose, is very tightly controlled to prevent there being one building from the Masonic Lodge all the way to Forest. So the width of each building is very tightly controlled in order to keep precisely what you're saying from happening. Also, please keep in mind that because all of these are broken into sub-districts, and we'll go into that further on later on, as it's currently drafted, you could not put a building at the sidewalk from the Masonic Lodge all the way to Forest, because there's a minimum setback of 25 feet required. And again, that is a direct result of what we heard here of the value of that green space. We don't want buildings that intense, that close to the sidewalk, from the Masonic Lodge to Forest. Therefore, it's a minimum setback of 25 feet, whereas down where the one Highland is in that area, it's a minimum setback of 0.
Okay, and how much space has to be between the buildings?
It depends on the building type.
Well, a row house, multi-family.
Yeah, I mean, if they keep talking about row houses, and I think for most of us, that's not a two-unit thing, it's a more than two-unit
Yeah,
thing.
she's in a.
So please keep in mind, that, as I said, each building type has its own set of standards. And for the row house, for example, I believe it could put no more than 4 units together. If I remember my
How much in between, how much space in between?
So I believe it's 15 feet
To the next floor.
to the next building.
The next, yeah.
So again, and so that's actually, to Tim's point about the paintbrush and the roller, we're now painting with that paintbrush as we'll start talking about how many units can be attached and how far apart they have to be. Today, they could tear all of those houses down, combine the lots, and put it at the street.
That's what I was saying. Today they can do that.
Today they could do that, yes, and within that, you could make them be 25 feet back from the sidewalk. But you're either gonna have a lot of very skinny row houses with 15 feet in between each chunk, which you're still gonna have this kind of Great Wall of China look that we have with One Highland, is just gonna be 25 feet back further back.
And I have to push back. I don't think today they can do that.
Yes, they can.
But a little bit I know, it would have to be in one of those uses, and I don't see one use that says residential. When you're proposing.
Well, they could do like what Highland is, where they have residential and commercial.
Right now, you cannot have residential.
Commercial. Well, yeah, guess what, if you're saying there would be row houses with commercial.
Well, we're not necessarily talking about necessarily row houses, but we're saying is that all of those homes could come down today, and One Highland, to use that example, could be built from the Masonic Lodge to Forest.
So obviously that needs to be fixed. I think the
Yeah,
idea
that's-
there is how do you fix it? Fix it with a traditional paradigm, or do you have to do a new paradigm that you're even saying is not even what the whole country does with Fairbanks? For some reason, we picked a paradigm that's not the majority use of Fairbanks.
There are many, many codes that use building type, but it is only useful in small geographic areas. So for example, there are large communities like Cincinnati who say it is too fine-grained to use building type. We have small geographic areas, therefore, and so predictability is an important value, therefore building type is a reasonable way to go. But we still haven't answered the primary question of, do we continue down this path of using form-based code? Because if the answer is no, then we terminate the conversation now and go back to the drawing board.
Well, I like having more control as opposed to less control. So form-based code gives us more control because people come and they present something right now, and like I said before, if they're checking all the boxes in this code, then they can do it. You have to say yes. And so I would like more control in that.
That's more or less what happened with the subdivision we just looked at. They did it all per code, and we really couldn't say anything against it. You know, we had no control beyond the lot size and the setbacks, and they met all that. So we really had no choice but to approve. Having a lot more control over uses and building types, I can't see that as being anything other than a good thing.
One thing that I was confirmed tonight, I suspected it all along, the meeting that we had at 5:30, it was interesting to hear, there were a lot of, I mean, I could name by name half of them, I knew some of the people there, but it isn't people that I knew who were converging on this. They had legitimate questions, legitimate concerns. I think a lot of it comes from one Highland not turning out in a way that somebody might like, and I don't know who yet, but haven't found them. Nonetheless, I think community input is important. I've asked this at the city council, and I mentioned it tonight. Kudos to you for showing up for an open discussion, open questions. Some of the questions were legitimate, they were new to me, you answered them well. That's what I think we need. As much as we're, the goal is to rely on 6 people to change the entire city, that seems a little stupid to me. And what enlightened me a lot is talking to people who've been on that, what's it called? The community plan, whatever, the future plan. They're so disheartened with what they're seeing. They were on the committee, they said, we don't even know what this is about. We didn't vote for this, and this was totally astounding me. They said, do you like this building or this building? They didn't like either one, but they had to pick one. And then the consensus was, well, everybody likes this one. Well, really, they wanted that one. And the doors are shut on a consensus of the community and being made to be a consensus of, half a dozen people. And I found it stunning to hear someone who had been on the committee who said, I don't even know any of this stuff in the community plan, and I was on the committee. I was on the community plan. So again, it was 4.5 years ago. And the concern to me is it's supposed to be done every 5 years. So are we going to push all this stuff through in the last 6 months and then say new community plan? Guess what? We didn't like that. It'd take 5 years and then I don't think that there is a big push the agreement behind the community plan if it's not being pushed and approved by the community plan.
That's great input. I think we were continuing to get some input from the board as to how you feel about it.
I think we already passed it in the window. I thought we did it 2 months ago.
I mean, I'll say I was part of some of those community discussions, and I remember the discussions of form-based code. It came up quite frequently, to be quite honest. I was in those meetings, I was in the zoning meetings, every one of them.
Well, no, I'm talking about the community plan.
And I'm talking about the community, that's what I mean.
Kevin was in that commission.
Yes,
Right.
yes, and those were all discussions, and that's what, our consultant, CT, who helped us with that, they didn't just pull things out of the air. They put things together, put this document together based on that information that was discussed. And so it was absolutely discussed.
I can't imagine how many committee meetings there were. There were 6 committees, and those committees met monthly for at least 12 months, if not 18 months. I mean, the city,
How many community members are on it?
the city tried every possible form of communication.
There's no way.
There
is no
somebody
way.
please.
And I came to one of those meetings, I said, I didn't know anything about it. They said, it's on the marquee in front of the city building. Well, guess what? When you're driving, the city building is on a curve.
I think that
You're
the
driving.
communication issue is something that is not supposed to be really addressed here. That is,
They're telling me that they reached out to me, no way.
I
I'm a
understand
driver, and I'm
that.
supposed to read the sign, and I'm going like this around the bend and
We
take a
really
walk
have
home
to get
from
back to this
school.
conversation.
I
Really?
agree, but I think that my problem with the form-based, I want to bring to you guys for consideration, because I know you're trying to do what's right, is now you got to pick the forms. You do form-based zoning, now we got to pick the forms. So I think that's the next step, because what's proposed here is forms that I think that everybody I talk to does. So, we got, again, we've got mixed issues, but that's just the thing. Do that, you're going to gonna decide the forms? Are you guys gonna decide that form, or this guy's gonna decide the form?
Well, and just to kind of put this in bigger context, so we're just having a discussion of should we have form-based zoning?
Exactly.
And then there's the question of, I mean, form-based zoning is just a tool. It depends what your actual regulations say, which is what kind of we're getting into. But at the end of the day, the whole zoning ordinance, at the end of the day, is voted on by city council. It's a city ordinance. So all of these rules and regulations, we're not shutting the door tonight. We're not shutting the door next month or the month after that. So it's a process, and it'll take several more months to get through that process. So that's why we're here for the discussions. Is if you have really specific questions about the row houses, say, then we want to hear what those specific concerns are of why you have those concerns.
I have not been as involved recently like I did by just coming to several of the meetings. But from what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, the form-based that you're proposing will help you guys maybe feed into what the public really wants, where what I witnessed with One Highland or whatever it's called, you guys, the only thing that saved that from being much taller was the regulation that was already in place. It couldn't go any higher, although it was being proposed to go higher. You guys had to say, no, wait a minute, it's gotta come down, because that's the only thing that you really could control. So with what I'm hearing, if I understand, form-based will help you conform what we, the public, really want. Is that, am I getting that correct?
That's the overall goal, yes.
Where the way One Highland happened, if they fit within that guideline period, that's it, no input, no any other things. But will form-based give you the ability to have more input?
Yeah, that's the
But
intent.
only if it's decided now.
Not
If
tonight.
it's planned. So my question is, and due to the lack of, communication, I'm gonna call it that. I mean, it just hit the Facebook page today about this meeting tonight about, so, I think there needs to be, I would say a survey, but I know that's never gonna happen. But what are you guys, because I'm gonna be honest and I'm gonna be blunt here, you guys are appointed people serving on this board, giving up your time, and I know it's been a lot of time, but you're not elected. So, I know it needs to go once you guys make your decision, then it will go to the, city council. You sat here and listened to people say, hey, we don't want row houses in the center of town. So are you going to then say, okay, when you go to these nitty-gritty details with that fine paintbrush, say, hey, we're going to do it in such a way that we're not going to end up with row houses in the central business district?
Well, these folks are also listening to other members of the public. I mean, that is
Right.
obviously so it's not just
I
this
understand.
contingency. So it's not only that. They're talking to the public. They're also professionals in many different areas associated with developing and zoning and planning. So that's why they're on the board. So, they've had some of these experiences in their professional careers, many of these experiences, and I think that's why we rely on them for their input and why they're in these positions. So, if they go with a different opinion of what, you have, that's where they're headed, and that's their opinion, and that's where they think we need to go. So, I think, at some point, we obviously need to move forward. So it's a matter of, okay, we're to that. What do we need to regulate next? Or how can we keep this somewhat regulated? And that's what we're here to do. I think so. It is one of those that you're not going to agree with everything that's in there, possibly, and I'm not going to agree with everything that's in there. But we're doing our best to try to bring it all together.
We understand that. We live in the full-time and I think we have these meetings to get our input. And obviously, no one here wants row houses.
question one yet.
Right.
Can you change
So, to
the
that
word?
end,
Because I don't think that's a good one, that deadness of the building.
But not just the central business district.
But
There are other parts
I
of Fort
understand
Thomas that don't push it to one end or another
Yes.
just because, well, we don't want it here, we'll put it over there because we don't really care about that end.
And I think the board will hear you loud and clear, they are, but we do need to move on.
yes, so the chair said that we were going to end this at 9:30, and we're at 9:21 now. So I want to point this out. This discussion is going to be continued until next month. This draft is on the website, correct, Kevin? So, as y'all have rightly pointed out, there are lots of key decisions. You know, what I think we're going to move forward. From what I heard, we're going to move forward with form-based zoning.
Form-based.
We're going to continue with that. So, there are lots of key decisions. There are several key decisions that have to be made, and you correctly identified some of them. The first is the subzones, because let's start at the big and work our way down. Are the subzones, as you're looking at this text that's on the website in preparation for next month, are the subzones properly defined? Meaning, are they the correct geographic area for the character that either exists today that you want to preserve or that you want to create in the future? So that's the first large question. The next is, are the appropriate building types applied in those subzones? So for example, where you're talking about from the Masonic Lodge to Forest is the traditional mixed use in the town center form-based district. There are various building types that are currently proposed in this draft. Between now and next month, look at that, but I'm asking you not to react just simply to the word row house, for example. Actually read the description of it in the text and look at the standards. And if you still come in and you say, I don't like row houses, or I don't like large multifamily, or I don't like this, or I don't like that, that's great. But keep in mind that there's a lot more to it than just a word. It's a description and it's a set of standards. So so look at the building form, building types, and make sure we've got the right ones of those. Then look at the standards for those. For example, how wide can the building be? How many units can be attached? Those kinds of things. And then finally look at the uses. But all of that has to work together in order to create the community you desire. And you can't pick out one piece of it without meaningfully looking at the others. So that's going to be your homework between now and next month. So I think this is actually a really good place to stop. Y'all agree?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Where is this actually accessible to people?
It's on our website, and if you want to call me, I'll get you exactly there. It's under, if you go under the website, the main heading, go under news. It's first thing under news. It's
City of Fort Thomas News, okay.
and it's right there, and it's every document that we've discussed.
Okay, great, thank you.
Alicia, how to put out before we close, that it's not just us city people that thinks this. I went back and looked at the city plan, and there was that city survey back then. And of the city survey, and I'm quoting again, page 64 of the city plan, while only 17% of respondents felt that additional housing options are needed in the city, new single-family homes were noted most often as the type needed. Of those, so 83%, like it just the way it is right. Of those 17%, only 34% wanted cluster homes. Only 33% wanted housing on top of storefronts in business districts. 56% of single-family homes, 83% of the people like it. So that's what I'm saying, when if we come back together next month, we understand it's not just for showing up, it's our community. And, you know, communication isn't very good, that has nothing to do with that.
I think some of that discussion, just specifically about the Center Business District was, if I remember correctly, was, right now it's a commercial. So you cannot have any residential. And so we were going to require residential on top of commercial. And did people want that? And a lot of people said, no, don't require that. So you can still have a Fifth Third, essentially. So it wasn't necessarily they wanted to preserve the existing homes, but that they didn't want to have to force residential on top of commercial. So that, there was a little bit of a different nuance there. Just, it's not, you may view it one way, but some of the questions were kind of couched in the fact that it is already zoned commercial. Do you want to introduce residential? And so there was concerns. And there was concerns about, you know, changing multifamily and other single-family residential.
I think it came as a little bit of a surprise that when you think of the center of town, I think the address has to be on A per se, you know, Northford House Avenue or whatever. I don't think that the side streets, I mean, I see the zoning because I look at the maps. It is considered central business district, but going down the side streets never dawned on me that they are considered the same as the drugstore. You know, so if something needs to be tweaked, I don't have any challenge with that.
Hey, we thank you all for coming. This is a process. He said it's months away when we have a completed document that'll have a hearing. The total public hearing. You guys are basically here for information gathering, if you would. But eventually we'll have.
Thanks for coming. Thank you for your input. It's definitely.
We want to hear that.
Yes, I made the motion to adjourn.
Everyone, be careful, there was a skunk right out. Right outside that door.
What's his